Oh, it's
There
very
you go.
strong language. Hmm. So, yeah. How we doing, Mark? How you doing, mate? You all right?
Good, mate. I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm good, thank you. And
How's
everybody,
things?
welcome to Talk It Out, the mental health podcast starring myself, Ivan Kaima, and Marco Ritchie. So, yeah, Marco, just wanted to quickly, before we get into it, just how you doing? How you feeling?
Yeah, all right. All right. Getting by. Bit bored of the lockdown, but I've kind of got to put up with it for as long as it lasts.
Yeah, no, I hear
Trying
you,
to
man.
entertain myself in between. How about
Well,
you?
lucky. I'm good, man. Just trying to survive. Today's the day where I would say it has got to me a little bit, just in the sense that everything feels a bit much today
Yeah.
and just feeling a bit sluggish and but again, we got to keep holding out, adhering to the rules, and ensuring that we are doing what needs to be done in order to reduce the curve so we can go back out and live our lives. Because I don't even remember what it's like to live my life.
I know it feels like it was, decades ago, but
A
there you
long
go.
millennium ago, mate. But as you'll be pleased to know, today's episode is about yourself, mate. Sharing a bit
It
more about
is,
your
yeah.
insights and who you are to the people. Now, for those that don't know and are new to the Talk It Out Mental Health podcast, we've got Marco here, who's a qualified PT, personal trainer. He is a really cool freelance writer as well, talking about mental health and kind of all range of wonderful topics. And also, as Marco doesn't mind me sharing, Marco is a cancer survivor as well. He's definitely been through the most and has been able to overcome, and it's really tested him. And of course, we have him here now, of course, as one of the founders, but also it'd be really interesting to hear his insights as to how it affected his mental health and how he overcame. So, Marco,
Yeah.
I guess really I want to know, and I guess the people want to know your kind of mental health journey, and when was your first instance that you noticed that you had a mental health condition, which is, I believe, anxiety, right?
Yeah. So for me, the big thing is anxiety. I was first kind of made aware of it when I was about 22, something like that. I was in my first full-time job. Um, I ended up going to the doctors because I wasn't feeling too good. I was feeling upset a lot of the time. Found myself kind of welling up, kind of involuntarily, like on the verge of tears a lot of the time. Wasn't enjoying my job. Went to the doctors, basically walked in, sat down, and he said, "How are you? What is it? How can I help you today?" And I just ended up breaking down in front of him, and he diagnosed me with depression and anxiety, which apparently goes hand in hand with a lot of people. But from there, the reason I was kind of thinking about when my first experience of it was because having been diagnosed, I could then look back on my life and I could look back to when I was like teenage years, and I could identify kind of instances where I was depressed or anxious about something. So realistically, even though I was diagnosed at like 21, 22, I think it's affected my life, pretty much all of my life, as far as I can remember anyway.
Wow. So even from 16, 17, you remember the instances as to when it first started. And I guess back then, right, what triggered it, would you say, in hindsight, looking at it back, what was it? Was it more just being a teenager, societal pressure? What was it, bro?
So for me, I actually think it was before my teenage years. I've got memories of when I was a kid and just being like so scared of social situations. So for me, it's social anxiety is the real kind of core of my anxiety. So I find things like kind of attending parties or events that some people would absolutely thrive in. I find them pretty daunting, especially when my anxiety is like when I'm feeling particularly strong symptoms of anxiety. I kind of dread them. I dread these kind of social events and social gatherings. But yeah, I remember kind of instances when I was a kid and going to things like a football club, and I remember begging my mum to take me to football training at this local football youth academy kind of thing. And I remember turning up. I was so nervous about it, so scared. She dropped me off, and literally, I went and lined up with these kids, and the coaches talking us through like what we're gonna do. I remember just being so scared that I just ran back to my mum. I just got back in the car and I was just crying. I was so
Serious.
scared. Yeah. It really, really freaked me out. And like, that's what I mean. I can think back to all of these events in my childhood where obviously this kind of anxiety was there. I just didn't have a label for it. I remember when I was at secondary school, I always found I found school quite worrying anyway, just the environment of it. I didn't really like, standing up in class or putting my hand up and talking in front of the class and saying answers or whatever. I hated doing presentations, any kind of like drama class. I remember phoning in sick to school 3 weeks in a row, but just to skip my drama lesson because it was just, being up in front of people just scared the hell out of me. But yeah, I didn't really have a label for it until I was early 20s. And
Crazy.
yeah, it was pretty mad.
And the fact that you, I guess, acknowledged it now and saw it now and realized that all those instances there triggered kind of how you feel now. How did you, I guess, learn to start accepting it and then begin the process of it getting better or it becoming more manageable? Because when you hear that, I mean, me and you are the polar opposite, right? Well, I'm the social guy. I like that. I think more my kind of anxiety leaks with pressure. So the more pressure I feel, the more anxious I feel, but in a good way. Whether it's good or bad pressure, I'm always going to feel anxious. But going out, that's the one thing I think, like, releasing that energy, being free, being that is definitely my kind of thing. So it's really interesting to hear social anxiety, you being away from people. And would you say you're quite introverted anyway? I wouldn't say you're the most introverted person, but
I don't know. I see myself as introverted, but I know if I'm comfortable around people, I can be just as much an extrovert as the next person.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because with me, yeah, you got jokes.
But like,
you got jokes.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be hard for people watching this video to tell that because stuff like this scares the hell out of me being on camera.
Yeah.
But
Now I know, but now it makes a lot of sense, man. When I used to ask you to come parties or come out with me, or you'd always give me some silly excuse, and I used to think, oh, what are you talking about? I just used to think you don't like me. I just used to think.
no, they're all valid reasons. But
yeah, it's interesting to know that hear from you now. Actually, again, part of this is also finding out a bit more about each other. We found out quite a bit about each other alone from this kind of conversation, which begs the difference, begs to tell, do guys really sentimental towards one another? What is a guy's friendship based off of? But that's for another time. But no, that's really interesting, Marco, that take on social anxiety. And so I guess, how have you learned since from then to now to kind of combat and deal with it?
So well, the first thing that really helped me was a diagnosis. And I think that's always, the first step is knowing what's wrong, or at least getting some sort of label to it so that you can kind of categorize what the issue is. You can kind of look at your treatment options, whatever. And I got that from CBT. So I got referred when I told you I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. They referred me to CBT. I think it was like 12 weeks or something. I ended up doing something like 16 weeks. And during that course, I think it was like the second session, the therapist I had just said that I think what this is social anxiety more than anything, just from, me communicating how I was feeling during the week and how I would dread these kind of events coming up. They would start affecting me like literally weeks in advance. I'd start to get nervous about a social event. But from there, I mean, CBT was awesome for me. I thought it was great. It was really helpful. Gave me all these kind of tools to identify like negative thought patterns, how I could kind of interject and kind of stop them in their path. And I still use those tools to this day. I still find myself kind of dropping into the negative thought patterns and the thought patterns that aren't particularly helpful, but I can identify that. And the fact that I can identify that means that I can do something about it. And I don't know, in terms of like specific actions that I take, I mean, sometimes I will practice like deep breathing or something like that. If I'm on my own, I wouldn't really want to be kind of doing deep breathing in front of other people. That would make me feel even more anxious. But it doesn't kind of affect me as much as it used to, social anxiety. I still get those kind of like spikes of anxiety, but now if I feel it, I can kind of think about things logically. So I can think about what my fear is going to be in that situation, which tends to be like, I fear that I'm going to make an idiot of myself, or someone's going to laugh at me, or they're not going to like me, or things like that. I can identify that that's a pretty silly thought. And just from doing that, I can then sit in that situation and actually become a lot more comfortable and allow myself to become comfortable.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thanks for that, Marco. And it's interesting, the fact that it, you still kind of apply the tools, and even to now, you feel like in yourself you made a lot of progress, right? From this experience.
I think so, definitely. I mean, the thing is, I'm 32, so I feel like life gets a little bit less sociable in your 30s than it is in your 20s anyway. So parties seem to have kind of dropped off the radar a bit in my life.
Nah,
So
that's you're only kind of right now because of COVID. Once this is over, you're gonna be back out there, mate.
Yeah, well, that's true. But I don't know. Friends have kind of moved to different parts of the country, so I see them less, and there's a lot less kind of social gatherings and whatever. So there's a lot less exposure to the trigger, as it were, and maybe that has helped me kind of get better, as it were.
Yeah.
But equally, I know that this CBT really did help me out, and I do think that I would recommend it to anyone who's experiencing depression or anxiety or any kind of like mild mental health issue. I think everyone should have CBT. I think it's so useful.
And for those that don't know, what is CBT?
Yeah, sorry, I keep using the acronym. Cognitive behavioral therapy. So for me, at least what I got from it was it kind of analyzes your own thought processes and helps you kind of compartmentalize. That's the word I'm looking for. Compartmentalize your thoughts, identify like negative feedback loops, and helps you to kind of interject when you're in those situations where your mind feels like it's going haywire, and all the symptoms that you're getting, feeling nervous, feeling sick, feeling tired, and all that kind of stuff as a result of those thought patterns. You can interject and go, actually, all of this stuff isn't true. It's not proven.
Yeah.
Like I found that in my sessions, we used to draw out my expectations of an event. So it would be like, what's the event coming up that you're dreading? Okay, it will be a birthday party on the weekend. And then my therapist would say, okay, what is it that you're worried about? Write down all these things. What is it that you think is going to happen? Fine. I'd write all these things down. Then I'd go to the event. I'd come back the next week and we'd go back over the event. And she'd go, okay, here's what you thought was going to happen. Now write down what actually happened. And just seeing that kind of like in real life and written down gives you enough proof to kind of say, actually, I realize that these thoughts they're not accurate. There's no reason for me to believe them.
Yeah.
So just by doing that and just giving me that kind of mindset really helped me out.
So could you if you don't mind, could you give an example of maybe one or two things you wrote down in a social situation where you may have felt nervous about, but you know that, okay, no, I don't have nothing to worry about?
Yeah, parties tended to be my kind of biggest fear. I used to, like I said, in my 20s, I used to attend quite a few of these social events, and that would always be, if I knew it was coming up, like in a month's time, I'd start feeling nervous about it, and I'd be gradually more and more nervous until like the day it occurs. So I would think, I'd sit down with my therapist and I'd think, I'd write down something like, I'm going to get there. No one's going to want to talk to me. I'm going to really not enjoy the night because I'm just going to be sat by the bar drinking to myself. No one thinks that I'm worthy of a discussion. No one thinks that I'm funny. That was a thought that I had in my head. Sure enough, I'd go to this party and it'd be fine. I'll be chatting away with people. If anything, the fact that I was kind of nervous being there meant that I was chatting more than usual. So actually, I was having a lot more conversation than I thought I was going to have. By the end of the night, I felt a lot better. So that's just one example.
Cool. That's interesting as well. So like the more nervous you are, the more you do. I guess in a way to kind of compensate for the fear that you're having.
Yeah, weirdly. I remember talking to go slightly off topic a bit. I remember talking to someone a few years ago that I used to work with, and he had real issues with anxiety. And his coping mechanisms were completely opposite of mine. So I want to like retract, and I want to go and take myself out of the situation. I want to just go and sit in a dark room by myself. He was completely opposite. He was the person who would just like, if he was nervous, he'd go and straight into the spotlight, and he'd be the loudest person in the room, and you just wouldn't be able to tell. It's just funny how like the people have got these different ways of dealing with it, you know.
Coping mechanisms, and it just kind of brings back to the fact that we're all the same. We're all kind of, we all have similar sports feelings.
Yeah,
we don't know what someone else is going through, so in a way, it's important to be kind to others as well, no matter how crazy we think it is. Not that it's crazy, but just how it's not common for you to hear something like that. So no, thank you for sharing that insight, because I had no idea myself, Marco.
yeah.
And so, and so even following on with that, and of course, you don't want me going in a bit into your kind of cancer kind of story as well. The mental health, obviously we know mental health is a killer, it is a silent killer, right? And mental health can, trigger and put a lot of stress on the body, trigger a lot of illnesses. Now, of course, I'm not making a comparison, but do you think that the stress of that contributed towards the diagnosis you may have had, or is that purely just genetics, or it just happened, that kind of thing? Coming from an ignorant kind of question.
I don't know. I don't know how. I know that stress is heavily linked with like cancer. If that's what you mean, like did it cause it?
Because the mental health puts stress on the body, and it's just triggering it, maybe that kind of thing. But even then, if you don't mind sharing kind of like the story of how you even found out you had cancer, and how that may have affected your mental health. And
the way I found out was a cruel irony, because I was at university. I was writing my dissertation, my end of year project, which was on cancer treatment.
So you studied science in university?
What was that, sorry?
Studied biology in university?
I was studying forensic biology. I don't really know why my end of course project was on cancer, but it was. But anyway, I was writing about this cancer treatment, and while I was studying, I remember I had this really bad flu, and I had like all of my lymph nodes basically swelled up in my neck, and I was feeling awful for like days. But I had to get this dissertation written. And I remember being in the library reading this textbook. I remember reading this paragraph about how viruses can cause cancer. It's quite rare, but they can. I mean, for example, liver cancer, hepatitis C can lead to a lot of liver cancers, but it's quite rare to cause other cancers. And I remember reading like how they found that this like influenza virus or something could cause lymph nodes to become swollen, and because they're so swollen, like I don't know exactly how it happened, but it could essentially kickstart some sort of like tumorous growth, as in like cells will start dividing rapidly, and if that went unchecked, then that could turn into cancer. I remember reading that. And this was a few days after like my symptoms had gone, but I still had like this one lymph node that was really swollen in my neck.
So your flu was gone, but you still had one lymph node.
Yeah. There's just one sticking out in my neck, and people would start commenting on it, like, "Are you all right? Like, you hurt your neck or something?" And I read that. What was that?
Was it a different color?
No. It was literally just like this side of my neck. It was just like a little kind of bulge on my neck. And I remember going to the doctors, and I don't think he should have done, but like one of the first things he said was, "Oh, it could be cancer," and I was a bit like,
literally off the bat.
Like you need to.
No, and how are you? How you doing?
No,
Not
he
even.
went through all that first, but then he said
Yeah.
that. And then I went for a blood test, all came back, and yeah, sure enough, I had a diagnosis of cancer. I had a cancer called Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Mm.
So it is cancer of the lymph system. But
And
yeah, that's how I was
when
diagnosed.
reading up on that, I understand that Hodgkin's lymphoma has a 95% success rate, which is, of course, good news to optimistic news, not good. Sorry. And
Yeah.
so I guess find out that sorry about that, not good, obviously.
No, but in all seriousness, like I remember reading that myself, and I remember thinking, out of all of the cancers that I could get, I'm probably quite lucky to get the one with the 95%
Cure rate.
survival rate within 5 years. So
So even with that, so finding that out, and then talk to me through what the process was after that, bro. So like when you found that out, how did you feel? How did that affect you mentally? Kind of how did your family take it? Like what was the steps after that realization?
Yeah. So obviously, like being diagnosed with cancer is a massive, very stressful situation for not just the person who's been diagnosed, but everyone else who's indirectly affected, like family, friends, all that kind of stuff. And I think it's strange because I kind of look back at it and I can see that immediately it had an effect on me. At the time, I didn't really feel it didn't feel like it had obviously affected me.
Mm.
Like I was at home because I kind of had to be because my immune system wasn't very good, so I couldn't really go and see friends. Um, I had a pretty bad diet because I couldn't really eat much because I wasn't feeling too well a lot of the time. I was tired all the time, and
Sorry, we kind of skipped a bit. Wait, did you do chemo and then during chemo?
yeah.
So
So
no, what I want is to break a bit behind that. So even just the kind of what were the next steps after you were diagnosed? I mean, like, so did
all
you
right.
start chemo like 4 or 5 days later? Did you then have to, and kind of like how you felt throughout the whole process?
So no,
Just
I started
again.
chemo. It was like not a couple of weeks. Couldn't have been that long, but it was about a week after I had a diagnosis. A few days to a week. But I started chemo and I had 4 cycles, which is not a lot. It's like 2 months worth. So you get 1 cycle every 2 weeks. And I did that, and then I had 2 weeks worth of radiotherapy, which was actually stronger than it should have been because they wanted to give me more chemo. But I basically refused, which is a kind of another very complex story. But I refused to take more chemotherapy, and they said, okay, to compensate for that, we're going to give you a higher dose of radiotherapy.
Yeah.
But yeah, during the whole process of it, it kind of happens really quickly. I know I said it takes like a few days to 1 week, and it obviously has to happen quickly because I want to save your life. But it's going from like a diagnosis where it's a pretty big shock anyway. You're in your head, you're sitting there going, I don't know what's going to happen next. Like, what do I do? What do I do in terms of my job? What do I do in terms of my studying? What do I do in terms of like, telling people about it? And then a few days later, you're in a hospital with a drip in your arm, and you're getting chemotherapy, which is
What does chemo feel like? What's that experience like?
How do you mean when you're getting it?
When you get in there, when it's dripped, because you hear a lot of stories of people feeling sick, vomiting, tiredness. What does chemo do to you exactly?
Well, that's actually what I was going to say. Chemotherapy in general has this kind of thought around it as if it's like a drug that should be feared, right?
Mm.
Because it's got all of these horrible side effects. Mine was actually at its worst in the final cycle, which is quite normal because the effects start to build up over time, right? My first 3 cycles, mostly it would just make me feel really tired, but it wouldn't make me feel too sick. And I remember when I went in for my first treatment, it's weird. You're in this kind of like, it's almost like a waiting room. It's really strange. It's like a little reception desk. At least this was my cancer unit. There was like a little reception desk. And there was like 4 seats just around it. And I'm sat in one seat. My mum's with me sat on a stool next to me. Then there's like 3 other women also all getting their chemotherapy at the same time. who have got different cancers. So there was a lady there who was terminal, but she was getting like a palliative care. There was someone else who was getting chemotherapy in like a little, like a bay behind like a curtain. They weren't feeling too good. You could tell they weren't feeling too good. And it's just a strange situation. Like you're kind of sitting there feeling very vulnerable. And I didn't really expect to have people around me having treatment because it felt like a very private kind of moment, right?
Yeah.
And I remember I completely like internalized it. So I just put my earphones in. I put on like a podcast. I just stopped talking, and they just put the stuff in my arm, and you just sit there for a few hours whilst this drip goes in.
So they put a drip in you, and it's just going into you for hours.
I think it was 2 hours long.
And it's just 2 hours of a drip inside your arm.
It's weird as well because my treatment was cold. It's like out of the fridge, so you can feel it go into your arm. Which is probably a bit too much information, but
it makes you feel a bit queasy, but not in a bad way. And going through that experience and having 3 cycles, and then I guess kind of fast forward into that cycle of when you finished everything. What were the feelings during that process? What were you feeling from then until now? The emotions that you felt, your mental health. What were the kind of thoughts that you were feeling? How did you manage to kind of like keep yourself sane through all of it?
Well, like I said, I kind of internalized a lot of it. It was only like a few years later that I realized the damage that it had done to me. I did see my friends, and I kind of felt vaguely normal for the first couple of years after what had happened. But then I got that job, and then I ended up kind of not going to break down, but I was diagnosed with.
No, what I mean during it. So while you were going through the chemo, were you scared? Were you worried? Did you have was you worried about mortality? All these things. What kind of things are popping through your mind as you were going through the whole process?
For me, it all it was there. Like I was aware that my treatment might not work. It could, lead to my death within a couple of years or something. And there is that worry, there is that fear, but I kind of locked that away a bit. I kind of deliberately didn't think about it.
So you just had a get on with it mentality. Don't think about anything. Try not to worry. Just get it done.
Effectively, yeah. I just shut everything off. It was just like, give me the treatment. I'm going to go home. I'm going to have a sleep afterwards. Come back in a couple of weeks and do the same thing again.
So this was between the ages of 22 and 24, am I right? That you went through this period?
No, this was before that. So that was, I think I was 19 or 20.
19 to 20. Okay. And so when you kind of went through that process and when they told you that, the cancer has shrunk or it's gone, what was that like that day or that time? Did you feel like you were getting better before that even? Did you start feeling better before that moment or?
It was amazing. I wasn't feeling better. At a point that I was told that I was cancer-free, I remember I was on the train. I can't remember where I was going. I was with my mum. I just got a phone call from the hospital saying, we just got your test results back. You're completely free of cancer. But then this is the complicated story that I mentioned earlier. Basically, I had my scan after my chemotherapy and they said that I was completely clear. You still have your radiotherapy afterwards because they kind of wanted it's almost like a safety measure just to kind of make sure everything's been killed. At that point, a couple of days later, I got a phone call from the hospital. So I was supposed to start my radiotherapy on the Monday. This was a Friday. I got my phone call saying you're cancer-free. I think it was Saturday that I've got a phone call saying your doctor would actually like you to start another 2 cycles of chemotherapy.
Just as a precaution?
From Monday. Because... And bear in mind that they decide your treatment plan with you at the start of your treatment. So they said to me, you have 2 cycles. If you're cancer-free after 2 cycles, you go straight into radiotherapy. If you're not, if there's any traces, we're going to give you another 2 cycles, and then you go into radiotherapy. Now, I was cancer-free, So I should technically have gone straight into radiotherapy. There was no argument about that. But they phoned me up and went, change your plan. We want you to come in 2 days' time, do another 2 cycles of chemotherapy. And their reasoning was because there was some paper that had come out saying that people of my age did marginally better if they got 2 more cycles.
Yeah.
And bear in mind, like we were saying, the survival rate anyway was like 95%. So I was like, I remember turning to my mum and I just said, I'm not doing that. I absolutely refuse to do that. And I went in.
Is it because of everything you was going through during the initial chemo? Was it too much for your body?
Yeah, the last cycle wasn't nice. I was really starting to feel it. And I think that mentally was really having an impact on me.
Describe to me what that felt like waking up with that final cycle. What was that like, that feeling? Was it intense pain all the time? What was it?
No, I wasn't in pain at all. I didn't have any kind of like surgery or any kind of like tumors that were pressing on any nerves or anything like that. But I was really, really tired all the time. I was really hungry, but I was also really like feeling nauseous all the time. And I do mean from the moment you wake up to the moment you're going to sleep, you feel sick. And again, apologies, this is too much information.
No, share, please.
But because you feel sick, you don't eat. So I was starting to lose weight. That's quite a stress on your mental health because you start to see it taking an effect on you physically. And I was just so tired all the time. I was in a bad mood because I didn't want to be doing it anymore. I couldn't see any mates. There was no outlet for like any kind of fun in my life. I just had like my PlayStation and I had my TV and that was about it. It was horrible. It was awful.
No, I hear that. And it's good, obviously, that you've recovered and everything. And so, following after that and the years that presided, you mentioned that you didn't realize until later how much of a mental toll it took on you until many years later. So, what was that like after all of it, and after you, I guess you began accepting everything? What was that mental kind of what were you going through during that period?
So once I finished my treatment?
Yeah, once you got past everything, and allowed it to started accepting what had happened.
It was weird actually, because once I kind of got better, I became a lot more outgoing. I was a lot more kind of like carefree because it's a bit like having a second chance.
Yeah.
It was like a grand term to use considering it's 95% survival rate, but still it felt like that kind of thing. But it was always on my mind, and I was really aware of the fact that it was actually, we were working at the same place, and I came back to work there, and I was really aware that my boss knew what had happened, and I was just really kind of paranoid that other people would know. And I don't really know why it was affecting me as much as it was. Like, so what if they know? I don't really care. I'm speaking on video about it, but at that time in my life, it felt like such a kind of private thing that I didn't want anyone to know, and it made me really paranoid. And actually, made me.
But would you say going through that experience, going through what made you feel vulnerable, scared, just kind of going through that and wondering, like, not wanting people to see you in a certain way because of everything you've been through?
Yeah, and I think that comes from like there's quite a bit of stigma about people with cancer. It's a lot less than it used to be, but there is this kind of idea that
that people may take pity on you.
Sorry?
That people may take pity on you.
Yeah, a bit like that. And I just didn't want that. I just wanted I wanted my normal life back,
And if anyone knows Marco, he's one of the most prideful people you'd meet. Not in a bad way, not in a bad way, prideful, but just very, very, very like, I'm this kind of guy. You ain't gonna see me in any other way but this. Like, I don't want to see me at my worst or nothing like that. Kind of, you're that kind of guy, would you say? You take pride in who you are, how you carry yourself, that kind of thing.
Yeah. It just, I didn't want to be seen as something that I didn't feel like it should define me, basically.
Yeah, and it hasn't defined you because of exactly where you are now, right? And so, what would be your biggest kind of advice or to give back to people, maybe going through cancer, someone they know going through cancer, and how they can mentally look after themselves during such a tumultuous time? Tumultuous, is that the right word to say? Tumultuous.
Tumultuous is a word, yeah.
Tumultuous. That's the word. I know it's a word, bro. I'm saying, did I say it right? I know it's a word. Don't try it just because I struggled with it a little bit. I know
That's
it's
the
a word.
right word. I was just saying it's the right word to use.
Yeah. But what advice would you give to people dealing with something? How can they overcome?
Uh, it's tough to give that advice because at the time, I actually think it impacted me quite badly. But I think it's very important to kind of have a support network. And I think my biggest mistake was I told my closest friends, but quite a few of them kind of, I feel like they didn't really know how to process it. So they kind of backed away a bit. They weren't really sure what to say, which
Yeah,
affected me.
and would you say it affected you bad way? And again, I'm just saying this because from my experience with you, when you first told me, because I met you at 25, and I remember when I met you, obviously you told me about your cancer story. And he told me that now and again you go in for your yearly remission. And I remember the first time you told me, I think one of the first things I said to you was, "Let me know if you want me to come with you. I'll sit in there and wait as well. I'll sit down and wait. No problem." Yeah. I mean, and I don't know. Obviously, you can lie on this if you want. I think you took that to heart in the sense of it's a nice guy you got here, man. You know what I mean? What a guy, Ivan. So cool. What a guy. He's just so swell. You know what I mean? Caring. No, I'm joking. I'm joking, but I remember saying to you because again, I don't know anyone that's gone through that, but when you care about someone, obviously you want to make sure you're there for them, regardless of who it is or what the situation is. So I remember telling you that, you know what, that's cool, Marco. If you need me to come to the remission checks, I'm happy to come with you, no problem. Sit there, wait, however long. If it's the whole day, I'll sit and wait with you, no problem. And kind of like what kind of, so I remember telling you that. So I guess the response is, but that's because I've been through so much adversity in my own life. I know how to be there for people in a way in which no matter how high I can see someone at the worst and low, and I'm still gonna love them the same way. I'm not gonna see you any different way.
Yeah.
I just, this is my dude, this is my person, and I'm gonna make sure I'm for that person. That's just that's just how I am. And so would you say with the other people, close friends you talk to, was it the case more so of them just wanting to be there but not knowing how, or just them not wanting to be there?
I don't think it was a case of them not wanting to be there. I think it's the first thing you said. I think they wanted to be there. They just didn't know how.
You know.
Which I think is fair. I mean,
Yeah.
none of my friend group had any of that kind of experience. And I can understand that. I was quite resentful for a few years because it did feel like I'd been a bit kind of abandoned.
Yeah.
But, and that affected me, affected my mental health quite a bit, carrying that resentment for so long. But I slowly kind of realized, actually, I understand their position. And I don't hold it against them at all. But I think just to go back to your original question, that it's so important to have that support network. I was lucky enough to have my mum around and my brothers. And I can't speak for other people how they're gonna process the situation. But for me, I look back and I think I probably should have spoken a lot more about how I was feeling. I really did kind of clam up and just get through it, push through it. When I shouldn't have done, really. I should have been talking to people. Because actually, I remember they offered me, when I was having my first treatment, there was this guy, I can't remember what company it was. He came from like a charity, but they basically offered you psychotherapy whilst you were having your treatment. And I was so kind of stuck in this mentality of, I'm just going to get through this. And I'm just going to kind of forget about it once it goes, that I turned it down. I turned down the psychotherapy. I said, nah, it's fine. I don't need that. And I look back and I think I definitely should have had that, because actually I wasn't really sure how to talk to my friends about it. I wasn't really sure about how to talk to my family about it. Having that kind of like a third party who was unrelated to all of it would have been perfect.
Yeah. Definitely, even just through my own mental health experiences, I realized the significance of having a neutral party being able to talk to you. It's just something about having a neutral person that you know is
Yeah.
not going to take their pity on you. They don't know you from nowhere, so they don't know your story. They can't judge you in any way, shape, or form. They're just going to take you as you come. I think there's such a power in that, and that's why I will sing to the very skies about therapy, having psychoanalysis and mental health. I know, Marco, and I understand, being your friend, obviously, over that period of time and seeing the growth that you've had within that time and from then to now, it's really good to see how you've come out from this, because most people don't, unfortunately, come out from a situation like this. Thankfully, you have, and rest in peace to those that may not have. And for those that mentally have gone through that, I know that can scar them for life. So I guess what kind of keeps you positive throughout all of this? Like, what is something that you use as a positive driving force in your day to day?
That's a big question.
Not really, mate.
Well, no, it is because I mean, positive driving force. Well, I kind of came from that. I came from that experience, and my first thing that I wanted to do was go and study about cancer. So I went and got a master's about cancer biology because I wanted to make.
Come on, big flex. Come on.
I wanted to go.
After that, I just went and got a master's in cancer. I just
went and got masters.
Ash, puff your chest out, my guy. Puff your chest out, my guy. Come on.
I basically wanted to, make a difference to other people, make sure that they didn't have to go through the same thing as me.
Yeah.
I kind of pursued that. I don't know. I've kind of used it as a driving force to kind of want to help others in different situations. So initially it was cancer, and I still, obviously want treatment to improve and people to have a much better experience than I did. But I ended up kind of going towards like cancer research in a lab, and I realized that I didn't really like that. And actually, over my career, as I was kind of figuring out where I wanted to go, I realized that my mental health was kind of becoming a bigger thing. Mental health for the people that I knew was getting a bigger thing. It was becoming a bigger thing. And I could always relate it back to that cancer experience. So I've kind of used that as my experience as a driver to try and make a difference.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's the positive, really, is that the reason that I'm doing this, for example, is because I want to make a difference, a positive difference.
I feel deep. No, thank you for that, Marco, and thank you so much for the insights and just learning a bit more about you and your story, and just making sure, letting others know that people that may have gone through these things, whether that be cancer or any other illness, that there's have a strong support network, be able to get the help that's available to you. And can you give any? I don't know. You can't, because you said as you was going through the process, you became very one track minded, so you didn't reach out to any kind of organizations or help in particular, right? But I guess in hindsight, if you were God forbid, obviously that have happened, what would you do differently?
I'd be far more vocal about how I felt. Far more. I'd be talking to everyone under the sun about how I was feeling, and I wouldn't try and hide it either, which is what I felt like I was trying to do. I felt like I was trying to make sure no one knew what was going on. It was almost like putting on a front, like, yeah, everything's fine. And it's a similar thing with my anxiety and the fact that I had depression as well. It's this idea of like, I think a lot of people try and put on a mask and pretend everything's fine.
Yeah, and suffer in silence.
But the more I've spoken about it, the more I've realised more people in the same position. And actually, the more I've spoken about it, the better I've felt about it, the better that the people who've told me they feel the same way have felt about it. I think it just applies to both situations, really.
I'm a firm believer in a problem shared is a problem half, mate.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
I'm glad that hindsight is a beautiful thing, man. You see what you could do differently and what you can share to others who may go through it, so that they don't make the same mistakes we may have. And that's the beauty of life, isn't it? So
Absolutely. The beauty of hindsight, mate.
That's it, mate.
But we can learn our lessons from that. So
in hindsight, I mean, I don't know if it's hindsight, because you knew I was your hero long before.
Right, I'm cutting this from the video.
Whoa! What's that about, eh? No, I'm joking. No, I'm playing, but no, jokes aside, thank you for sharing that insight, Marco. thanks for being open and honest about something like this. Because for me, something I don't know even now if I'll be able to express in the detail you have about something so sensitive. And it's just good to see you've overcome it and you are using your abilities now to kind of share your experiences with others so that others can feel that. So yeah. And I guess, that I believe that concludes today's segment of getting to know us. So we're about 3 or 4 episodes in our story, the founders. So, we've got a lot more kind of really cool content coming out for you guys. We're going to have some more guest speakers on, going to mix up the range of topics, talk about a whole range of things, and also giving you guys the opportunity to ask us what you want to hear from us or to talk about. So
definitely. We want to know what they want us to talk about. Definitely. Why
Did I
you
just say
staring at me
that? Did I just say that?
Yeah, no, I was just agreeing.
You're following on. Oh, sorry. I was trying to give you that stern look, like, bruv, you cut me off.
Oh, sorry. I thought you finished. The audio went a bit funny. I thought.
I like to go on my little. I like to go on my little solo tips. You know what I mean? When my vibe, I'm just in my zone. I don't know what you're playing at, mate. But joke aside. Thank you, Marco, for your time as well, and thank you, everybody. So, but yeah, that's everything from me, and obviously, of course, Marco.
Yeah, that's everything from me. That was good.
So, no, you're not gonna thank the people then for listening. You're not gonna. You think you're too nice now, innit? Okay, cool. You heard it. This is why I'm the fave, just so you know that.
Always thank you for listening. And please come back for the next one.
Yeah, no doubt. It's gonna get bigger and better. Thank you, Marco. Hope you have a fantastic evening, my friend. I'll speak to you guys soon. Have a good one. Take care, everyone. Good night.